Hi, everybody, and welcome to Storms on the Way. I'm Alastair Stevens.
And I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive.
And in today's show, we're discussing the second episode of the Starz adaptation of American Gods and possibly talking a little about burning ships and how that's becoming a motif for
Stop
Starz.
it, Starz.
Oh.
Just stop it.
Oh,
You know what you're
Liz.
doing to me. I've made it very clear.
I guess I want to begin by asking you both about your first responses to this episode. Did you like this episode more than the first, a little less than the first, around the same? How do you feel about the second episode here, Elizabeth?
Broad strokes. I loved the opening so much. And I also loved the close. The middle was a little weak for me. So I felt maybe it was just so not what I wanted from the adaptation, which isn't fair. So I'll go ahead and own up to that right away. But yeah, I loved those two sequences so much at the beginning and at the end, the two bookends, that I think overall I liked it more. I don't know. This is hard. I don't like to pick favorites. You know I don't like to pick favorites.
That's true. That's fair. I mean, I'll try and refrain from asking you favorite-oriented questions. Can you unpack a little how the adaptation isn't quite what you were looking for?
Oh, sure. Particularly, I think, in regards to Laura. Everything with Shadow's first night out of prison, his first time sleeping in a bed, his first time getting that bath, and when he saw Laura, I just remember that sequence so much in the book as her being shockingly a corpse. And and see, that's very surprising to you, I'm sure, Daphne, because you just see like his wife walking in the bedroom. But she was very much a corpse, like straight out of the grave, still in the grave clothes, mud on her shoes from traipsing through the rainy graveyard. And they had quite a long, beautiful conversation, and didn't they? I think they both smoked, and just there was so much about that that evoked so many different senses for me and really stood out in my mind. Having read the book, it was my favorite sequence thus far, and so to have it just such a quick little blip in this episode was disappointing to me. So I guess that's the main reason that just didn't work overall.
It's certainly fair to say, I think, that we talked last time about how faithful the first episode was in its adaptive choices. There's a lot of revision, but basically the first episode is the first two chapters of the book, pretty much beat by beat. This episode is way more freely adapted from the book. And we're getting hints now that it's actually, that the show is going to deviate from the book even more than we may have initially expected, I think. We'll maybe talk a little about that.
It could be. And I still haven't finished the book, so there's that too. So there were things that came up where Alastair had said, they're really skipping ahead in the book. I was like, clearly, because I don't know this. This is new to me completely.
Wow. Interesting.
We're really, really restructuring a lot of the elements contained within the novel. Daphne, how was your response to the second episode?
I hadn't prepared for that question, but I think I might like it better than the first. I do also really love the beginning. I'm definitely, I guess similar to my experience of the first, I'm like super, super influenced by the things that delight me here, which is the McShane-ness, of course, but also no, but the end, we'll go into that, but like the end is just like specially delightful for me.
Sure.
So I think I was very pleased with it overall. I am noticing that I am extra super happy when Ian McShane is in the scene.
Yeah.
But I'm also really happy with everyone else. So yeah, I think I'll just like I don't know where it stands in relation to the first one, but there's a lot of stuff here I really like. I came out of it with like a whole lot of like, I don't understand that, but I'm engaged by it.
Right.
Sure.
I got I had a lot of moments like that in this episode.
It's a pretty good place to be. Those are good moments to have. I think I liked this episode pretty comprehensively more than I liked the first. I thought it delivered a lot on the promise, a lot of the thematic and kind of textural promise of the first episode. I felt as though my vision of this world was clearer, maybe still not quite the vision of the world that I would want, but we did start to get a little of the grime and the grit that we discussed last week. Not comprehensively, not throughout the episode. Shadow's house is still strange to me, but I really liked the texture that we're getting now. So I'm in. I mean, as if I wasn't in already at the end of the first episode. Now I am completely in. I am completely compelled by it. And I want to talk just a little, because we didn't really talk about this last week for some weird reason. The music in American Gods is spectacular. For me, the music in the second episode so far exceeded the music in the first that I was rocked back on my heels by it. It's extraordinary. The slow cello sweep of Chernobog's theme is just so outstanding.
Oh, the jazz and the Anansi sequence was my favorite.
Also
the Anansi
fantastic.
Theme.
Also fantastic.
Yeah. And I think that's really what appealed to me most about those two. I talked about those two bookended scenes is because the music made it so haunting and just, oh gosh, it really sticks with you.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that as much in the middle, I suppose. But yeah, the music is just extraordinary.
This is great. I might be speaking up for the middle of the episode.
Maybe you will.
Oh no,
celebrate
yeah.
the
I
bookends.
also love. So yeah, I love if we were like breaking into three, like the beginning, the end, and the giant chunk of middle. There's stuff I adore in the middle,
Good,
and I think
okay.
this episode tells a story in a way that the first episode didn't.
That's really interesting because
That
I think,
is.
Elizabeth, you and I both felt somewhat the opposite, right?
Yeah,
That this felt very, very serialized. It didn't really feel as focused and as unified, if you like, as the first episode, and certainly not as unified as episodes of Black Sails, which we'll refer to again and again
Right.
through this discussion.
Get
of
used to it,
American
everyone.
Gods.
It's true. Yeah, I didn't feel that it stood on its own quite so well. It's true.
So yeah, maybe this. I mean, it's just I gotta say, I've always been a person who's like, I will always read the book before I watch the movie or TV show. I'm super enjoying this place that I'm in. So maybe it's because I'm not at all thinking about the book. Like for me, I see how the beginning is relating to the end. Like for me in this one episode, I really felt like it was, I don't know, a capsule that had like a point and a thesis statement, we could say.
That's good. You're right. It may well be book bias, especially because we talked earlier that this episode ends mid-chapter, mid-story, like right there in the apartment, right before my favorite part of what happens in the apartment. So there might be a little bit of personal bias where I'm like, wait a minute. Now? We're stopping now?
Well, I do think it's fair to say that the story begins and ends with a lot of very similar themes and a lot of very similar motifs. We have obviously a focus on race, which I guess we can definitely talk about because after our conversation last week about the lynching imagery, it does seem, much to my surprise and delight, that American Gods is going to engage with issues of race in a more thoughtful and more thematic way than I had
agree. I agree
anticipated.
completely. I
Good.
kind of take back a little bit of what I said. Like I'm still have some issues about that being in the first episode without being resolved in the first episode. But the second episode did kind of make me feel like, okay, this is for real. Like they're full on going to do this. So like the imagery and the imagery, the lynching imagery in the first episode is in service of talking about race and racial violence and discrimination.
Yes.
And so therefore it's awesome. Like I was upset that I thought maybe it was just going to be used to be serving some other purpose and not just to be shocking and to be serving a different purpose, and that would have been really wrong. But yeah, I'm starting to think, okay, I'm on board. Like I think this is going to be a really satisfying show for me politically, not just on those other fronts.
Yeah, which is one of the ways in which I think the adaptation is completely successful, or at least is carrying with it at this point a lot of promise, because as we said, because Shadow's ethnicity is never defined within the pages of the book, there is some material in there. Of course, when you're talking about America, you have to talk about racial tension, you have to talk about civil rights, you have to talk about disparity and inequality. But because the show is more purposeful, more definitive, it gets to address those subjects much more directly. Daphne, I have no idea if you know this, but the opening scene with Anansi is a complete fabrication for the show. That's not taken from the pages of the book at all.
Oh, wow. And I love it like crazy. Okay.
Me too.
That's awesome.
Extraordinary. In fact, I think we should just get into it.
Yeah,
Because
let's do it.
that is a bold, cold open. We get our brief title card, I suppose we can call it, the Coming to America calligraphy, which just never stops being beautiful.
It's so gorgeous. Yeah.
There's a way that I can watch 90 minutes of,
you can.
Ibis
It's
just
on
writing.
YouTube, not Ibis exactly, but I was looking up some things about calligraphy earlier in the week, and you can just watch people write with a fountain pen all day long to your heart's
That's
content.
pretty fantastic.
I thought so.
You're diving into an ASMR well there.
That's what they said. They said accidental ASMR. Yes. Yeah.
Love it.
We begin in the hold of the Dutch ship with the prisoners, the slaves. We get the prayer to Anansi, and then he shows up. How did that work for you, Daphne?
Well, I loved it. How does it work for me? Wow, I feel like I could talk a lot about this opening. I wrote a lot of notes about this. I love that he's summoned and he arrives, which, seems, and I love that the summoning relates to the situation of the man summoning him. He's basically saying, Anansi, I would offer you all these things, but they've bound my hand. Therefore, I am no longer I'm not, he doesn't, obviously from the conversation, you understand that these African prisoners do not know what they're going to.
Yes.
But what he does know is that the binding of his hands has made him unable to offer sacrifice to his God.
Which is thematically, of course, so powerful. Yeah.
Right. Well, right. And, and then they talk about, I think sacrifice and submission, I'll just be upfront. I think sacrifice and submission is like what this episode's about. And that's that's how the beginning ties into the end. And there is kind of an arc of those two themes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I loved that. I loved that the way he appeared, that, that it's just very clear that he was summoned and appeared because of the summoning.
Elizabeth, how did Orlando Jones' performance as Anansi engage you?
I love it so much. This is another one where I love the show Anansi so much better than the book Anansi already, which isn't to say that I didn't like. It's Mr. Nancy, right?
Mr. Nancy is his everyday name,
right? Who works for me too in the book, and it's fun. But this is a just stellar performance. I think really came out swinging, surprised me, especially because we were in such dire circumstance, and we've got the haunting, gorgeous, smoky, sultry jazz music underneath that is speaking to so many various decades and points of history, and to have it overlap with this slave ship is just fascinating anyway. And then he comes in just irreverent and sassy and pissed, and I loved him from minute one.
Well, anger gets shit done.
Gets shit done. I like it.
An amazing performance. It's a really striking depiction of this character. I'm a little thrown out by it only because he is himself so anachronistic. Because he is offering not just a 20th century appearance, but a 20th century perspective.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
And that is enormously suggestive about the capabilities of gods.
Yep.
Because we've had no sense up to this point that gods are in any way unbound from linear time. I don't certainly have a sense that other gods who may or may not appear in this story have any ability to see the future or any ability to represent that future. But in this moment, Anansi does, and I think we can maybe tie that to the ferocity of belief. When he's talking about burning the ship, he's talking about giving their lives for something greater.
Right.
And he's not, though we may be tempted to believe that he is, I think he's pretty evidently not talking about rebellion, not talking about freedom in any kind of abstract sense. These men are going to die, and it's going to have no lasting consequence except for Anansi.
Right. Because the sacrifice.
The sacrifice that he
right. Because he says specifically sacrifice. The thing that I love about, I hadn't thought about that. That's true. That's interesting. Like, I guess because I don't have any context, the idea that he could kind of live out of space and time just seemed normal to me because he's a god. Like that he could be the spider and then be the man and then be the man with the spider head. And, and all of that that seemed, but what I love is that he does chronicle, the subjugation of African people brought to the United States or brought to the New World and their generations. And I love that everything about him is referencing not just the music, but everything about him is referencing jazz, which is a music that is, would never have existed without the influence of the music that African people brought to our country in the first place. So the jazz is an embodiment of the story that he's telling.
Even down to the reference to the purple shirt.
Yes.
Yep.
It's It's extraordinary. It is a fantastic performance. I love it. It's beautifully written, I should say,
Yes.
too, to pay due respect to the script here. But the performance is absolutely breathtaking. And I generally don't watch the little clips at the end of the Starz original shows. I generally don't watch the little behind the scenes moments. I
Right.
definitely don't watch the trailers for next week on American Gods, because I don't know who cuts those, but I'm pretty sure they're not done in-house. I'm pretty sure that's done by someone at Starz,
Well,
because
I do. Yeah, it's done by PR.
Yeah.
I know these things because of book sales now. Those things are done by PR, and those are decisions made by PR, and so they're. It depends on the PR team. Like different PR teams are trying more or less to be, in sync with the creators of a show, but those are PR decisions.
And the purpose of PR is very different from the purpose of
Absolutely.
a TV show. Their intent is not narrative, it's promotional, and that's completely fine.
Exactly.
And sometimes those cut sections, sometimes the trailers that we get from Starz are fantastic in and of themselves, but because they don't speak directly always to that core narrative vision, I try to avoid them. But I did watch the behind the scenes segment on shooting this opening, and it's just stunning. It's just extraordinary. And we get, obviously, this discussion of race in what will be America someday, but we also get the powerful iconography of the hammer, which is also going to tie us back around to Chernobyl at the end of at the end of the episode. For me, this works just in every way imaginable. And when I say that I'm challenged by Anansi's anachronistic qualities, that's less a complaint and more a fascinated kind of observation. I'm just really engaged now by what this character is capable of.
So, and the last thing I wanted to bring up, we already talked about, again, how this kind of reframed my feelings about the lynching imagery, which continues in this episode because we go straight to that from here.
It's a hard cut, yeah.
It is a hard cut, and it was like suddenly like, okay, like we just talked about why this imagery should be super disturbing to you beyond like the essence of being hanged. It's different than being hanged.
Yes. Yeah. That the speech itself was very disturbing to me, as it should be, but it made me deeply uncomfortable and unsettled. And I liked that. It was very bold and important.
Well, and that goes to, and again, like this is a moment where I'm just going to say something, and I don't really know how this relates to the book, obviously, but the thing I was really paying attention to in this episode was God's trying to get a rise out of people. Which, this is very obvious here. Like, he references it specifically. Yeah. Let's all get angry. Angry's good. And then you have and you have that juxtaposition between, he's like, see this guy? He's awesome because he's getting angry. And then you have the other guy who's like, yeah, but if we burn the ship, we're going to die. And so that's our cautious guy.
Yeah.
And then he's like, dude, you're dead anyway. What does it matter? Like, you might as well die for me. Yeah. Which any god could kind of say to any mortal. Like, we are all basically two immortals. We are all basically just dead. We're just temporarily not dead.
Well, we'll get another perspective on this with Bilquis later, who is apparently gathering her strength.
Oh yeah,
which
she's doing great.
A really powerful sequence. Yeah.
But I just feel like this will then. We've got possibly these two sides of Shadow. Like we saw that that Mad Sweeney was able to get a rise out of him, but most of the time he's really holding that together and being the cautious dude. But I just feel like it was really interesting, especially with Wednesday and Shadow here. Like this, like sometimes Wednesday's cajoling him and sometimes he's trying to get a rise out of him. And I still don't completely understand their relationship. So I'm not sure where that stands, but I just felt like it was just a really interesting thing here about when gods are trying to like get people riled up.
Yeah. I must admit, what struck me most powerfully about this opening with Anansi is the black salesness of it all, as we discussed last week.
Yes.
We spent a lot of time talking about
I know.
Not just the burning ship, but let me tell you a
all
story.
the visual language. I know, right?
Feels that's almost like a reference at this point.
I would love that if they watched Black Sails and they were fans. That would make me really happy.
I said during the live tweet, we don't have comprehensive proof that American Gods and Black Sails aren't set in the same universe.
It's so true.
Lawrence Sarner suggested that if Wednesday had existed during the time of Black Sails, that he would have been Teach, in fact, which for the Black Sails viewers in the audience, just gave them a momentary shiver and the opportunity to reflect on their own mortality and terrible, terrible things.
Reflect on all sorts of things.
All sorts of things. Do we have anything else to say about this opening segment? Elizabeth, do you have anything else to offer on that?
I think that covers everything for me. Yeah, I loved it. I really loved it. Oh, I wanted to talk a little bit about the prayer and about how much I thought it spoke to Faith. Being stuck in an absolutely impossible situation and having nothing to offer his God, but saying, but you can hear my voice. Help me from this place and I will sing to you all my life. It was gorgeously written, and beautifully done in that, just that hint of sing-song. Beautifully done. So compelling.
Accent work, again, is
yeah.
incredible. And the way, we talked about this last week, this is apparently going to be something that American Gods is doing consciously, because the way that Orlando Jones moderates and mediates his accent is spectacular.
He gets good in Dutch on us for a little bit, like Dutch / South African when he talks about black.
Yeah, it's just extraordinary. So from there, we hard cut to Shadow's lynching, and from there, we hard cut to the hospital, to where Shadow is being fixed up.
Oh, can we not talk
Tough to watch. Really tough to watch. But we take a breath when he returns to the motel and talks with Wednesday, talks to him about Technical Boy, talks to him about the lynching, mentions Strange Fruit, which is really beautifully done. There are a few moments in this episode where things are placed into the mouths of different characters from the book. There's a scene later with Wednesday, which I like much less in the show, because Wednesday says things out loud, which Shadow says internally in the book. But
that's always a hard thing with adaptation.
But giving Shadow, actually allowing him to express, just to use the phrase strange fruit, and to give him a consciousness of that, I think is really rather beautiful. How does this...
also that flip going from the strange fruit to the plucky fruit.
Yes.
Which was fascinating to me.
I wanted to ask you, Daphne, how does Wednesday work for you here? How does Ian McShane work for you here? Because we get, again, another perspective on this character who is as mutable and as fluid as anything I've ever seen.
Okay, so should I just list you all the things that were fascinating to me?
Please do.
I mean, Ian McShane, first off. But no, I loved it. I loved that he was passing the time as instinct indicated. That was fascinating to me. And then there was the whole thing. I mean, this is what I was saying about the trying to get a rise out of someone. Like here, Wednesday is like, Shadow shows up and Wednesday doesn't really talk about the state that he's in, but he seems like really, really eager to make Shadow happy. He's like, are you hungry? Can I get you some pizza? Should I tell you, do you want to talk to my lady friend here? Like, he's just like really, we've not seen him like this. We've not seen this version of him. Like, he is not playing it cool at all. And then we have that conversation with the strange fruit to the plucky fruit, which... my note that I wrote from that was like, okay, who the hell is Shadow? Like
that, I think is.
There's a lot of that in here too. Is like suddenly like Wednesday's talking to Shadow, not like he's just like random dude, but like super special dude. So that just made me ask, who is Shadow?
Well, and I think we get two beats within the episode that lead us in that direction, because the second is media
in the diner.
A job.
And then the diner also.
No, you're right. Yes, right. Yes. There's a lot about which we might
singled
speculate.
Out. Like everyone seems to be singling him out and not. And you could, in the first episode, you could have thought that was just because of Wednesday. That like Wednesday found him for whatever reason, and that everyone else is doing it because of Wednesday. Yeah. But then Wednesday said specifically that the universe is singling you out. And then and then there's the last bit where he's just like, okay, wait a minute. Just in case you're worrying, like, I am super pissed and kind of scary now at the end. So it's just like he went through a lot. He went through a lot of variations of himself in a very short conversation in a parking lot. And then back to the Ian McShane is just like, and Ian McShane can pull that shit off like very few people can.
No kidding. That is the gift that I need from this episode, is just because I didn't lose my temper doesn't mean that I'm not angry or that I don't have a plan.
Gorgeous.
I will find that for you, Alastair.
Yep.
That's very, very good. Then we get a brief sequence, which I think is really a nod to the book readers. This wasn't highlighted in the show at all, but when Shadow is leaving prison, he makes 3 promises to himself, basically, that he is going to go home, he's going to have a bath, He's going to have sex with Laura, and then he's going to stay out of trouble for the rest of his life. And that's a pretty powerful motif in the first couple chapters.
And
that
another
we didn't
three.
really highlight. And another 3-beat, of course. Another rule of 3, yes. So the bath in the motel, this tragic, somewhat absurd, somewhat comical bath. This
Yes.
is not what he expected. This is not what he anticipated. This is not what he wanted.
Yeah.
But it is
And literally does not
human
fit.
and
Now, was
vulnerable.
he at the motel or did he stay? It seemed to me that he stayed at home.
No, that was at the motel.
I
That was
read
a
that as
different
well,
bath.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, he got
yeah.
okay, all right.
And then he's wearing that motel shirt. when
And then he gets the
goes to his
motel
house.
shirt when he goes back to the house. Okay, I was losing track just a little
If there was
bit.
if there was ever two shirts that like just spoke completely different languages from
Yes.
each other. Last episode we had the shirt that could barely stay on and was a beautiful dress shirt, and now we have goofy motel shirt.
the Motel America.
Yep.
The perfectly judged and beautifully composed and exactly the right kind of kitschy. I
Yep.
thought
Yes,
it was just,
perfect, spot on.
just
And
gorgeous.
with that bison, which is so important
Yes,
too.
of course, of
Yeah.
course.
Yep.
So then we have the very brief Laura dream. And I
Yes.
guess we've kind of hinted at this already. We, of course, were expecting this because Laura's return is so important in the books. Now, Daphne, did you get to Laura's return?
No, I did not get to that. And
Okay.
after what Liz just said, now I'm fascinated because for me, it just felt like a dream, and then felt like it made sense with when he goes back to his house, seeing her all over the house. Like it was just like
Right.
it was just like the process of
Grief.
him. Right, exactly. Like him going to, like, he saw her in this dream and then he cried. And that made a lot of sense. And then he envisioned her in the house, and that made a lot of sense because that's what we would do.
Right.
So I guess we'll have the opportunity to talk about Laura again.
Yes.
I feel bad about talking about this as though it were, spoilerable material, but I feel as though Laura has been all over the promotional material for
Yeah,
American
that's
Gods.
true.
So I don't necessarily feel as though an absence of knowledge about Laura is in any way necessary to enjoying the story, because if it was, then they would have withheld this from the promotional materials.
Right.
So,
No, I'm totally aware that she's
Yeah.
a major character, and she was she was like, she was in New York when Lauren
Yeah,
interviewed
yeah,
everyone.
exactly,
No, I'm totally aware that
Okay.
she's going to be a part of the story in some way or another.
Yeah. So I think
I don't know how, but I know
Right.
that she will be showing up.
we'll hold on that then until we get more Laura to discuss. But we do get to talk about Shadow's house and his home with Laura, which, Elizabeth, this did not work for you at all.
No, the only part that did was when we saw the preparations for the welcome home party, for the Shadows welcoming back party. That worked for me.
Now, what
That
was it about
specific space?
the house that didn't sit right for you?
It was too glossy, too pretty, too middle
wow.
class. It was
Really?
yes, on the outside especially. That
outside
just
looked much
it
fancier
was
than the
so
inside.
polished, and it just struck me as strange. I wanted something just a little dingier, a little less well kept, especially by someone, especially by I suppose by a small single woman in this giant 2-story house. Like I just expected to see a little more evidence that I don't know that it needed some care. I would have liked to see something a little decrepit about the state of it. A little.
Yeah. For me, there
have-
was an interesting kind of tension of intentionality there, because the sink was full of unwashed dishes,
That is
for
true,
example.
right.
Which I
But
liked.
the counters were scrubbed to a shine. And it
Yeah.
did feel a little unreal. It did feel a little staged, I think. Which,
interesting.
again, we have to question how deep we are in Shadow's POV.
Right.
And how much this feels like
Well,
his
clearly we're
home
very
more.
deep because he kept seeing her.
Exactly
He kept
right.
seeing-
Yes.
right,
So
yeah.
So I have a question, like,
Yeah.
because my impression of it was that the inside was, I mean, again, the bedroom that had that like very kind of modern looking lamp, but
Right,
like
the
overall,
bedroom
but overall, my impression was we saw the outside and was like, damn, look at that house, and then the inside felt like actually a 1-story house.
Yeah.
Like so I was curious, like, if that would resonate with you all, that an intentional choice to make the outside seem grander and different than
Facade.
the inside, right?
certainly, yeah.
Because
And
to
the-
me, the two houses didn't match, and the inside
didn't
house
at all.
actually seemed quite plain.
yes. Yeah. With the exception of the bedroom. I would say that the kitchen worked.
But like,
for me,
the
and-
bathroom was like a pretty
Yeah.
crappy linoleum on the ground, and which you get a close up on because he's like scrubbing it like
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
But the bedroom seemed a tad bit fancier, but the kitchen to me didn't seem particularly fancy, nor
No,
did
you're
the
right.
living room. And yeah, the decorations just seemed really sad, and not just because of the circumstance.
Right. But that was more what I was expecting from Shadow's house, like his house with Laura, just something humble and a little more modest and just a little bit on the rundown side.
Right. But see, I felt like the inside was that. Like
It was. Yeah.
It seems like it
that part
can't
worked.
be accidental. Like they're so deliberate about how everything looks. It seems like it can't be accidental that they chose that exterior to the house.
Yeah. I think if you cut that establishing shot of the exterior of the house, not only because, the color's a little saturated and the house is a
Right.
little too glossy and it's all just a little
Right.
too much, but then the beat right at the end of that establishing shot where the paperboy throws the paper and it hits Shadow in the back.
I love that.
You love that? Really?
Yes.
What did you love about that, Daphne?
I love that because I feel like Shadow's been trying to make himself invisible. I mean, this goes back to this whole thing of who is Shadow. Shadow's been trying to make himself invisible, but he's so visible. Like he says in the diner, he has that conversation where he's like, don't notice me, please.
Yeah.
Can y'all just not notice me? And it's like the kid just threw a paper it hit him as if he was invisible. So for me, it was like kind of like, maybe to our world he is invisible. Like I just had all these thoughts about like maybe he's not really in our world. Like maybe he's perhaps more in the God world right now than in the human world.
Wow.
And maybe gods are noticing him, but humans are not.
Huh.
Okay, I like that much more than I just dismissed that as a joke. I think it's because we
Yeah.
have
Oh
that.
God, I didn't see it as a joke at all.
The shot of the house feels
Right.
again so Brian Fuller,
Right.
and then
Yes.
the joke of Shadow being hit in the
See,
back by the paper feels so Brian Fuller
Yeah.
that I just wrote it off as a joke. But I like that very
like
much,
that.
Daphne.
I have no I'm not only don't know the book, I also don't know Brian Fuller. I don't think I've ever seen anything he's done. So I have
Interesting.
no
Okay.
context for that either. I'm just
Sure.
I'm just looking at it. I'm not. I
like
would
that.
have no context to say, oh, that's a Brian Fuller thing. None.
I like the depth of that interpretation. You're doing very good textual analysis here, Daphne.
Yes. It's nice.
It's my hobby.
So then we have Shadow packing up all of his belongings. We have him interacting visually, I suppose, with this box of
Yes.
Laura's belongings from the coroner's office. We have him studying the wedding ring. Did we like that wedding ring?
No, that's super fancy.
It's
Yeah,
super fancy.
I
There's
thought
no
so,
way
too.
it's incredibly expensive. Then I thought maybe he knocked off a casino for it. I don't know. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I guess
That's
we're just
true.
gonna. But then, yeah, no, it didn't work for me. I had to make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the only way it would work is like the puppiness. I mean, I'm assuming that this puppy reads to me as an imbalanced relationship. So,
Interesting. Okay.
so maybe, that and wait, oh shoot, I know you all love her now. I feel really bad that I'm forgetting her name.
Audrey.
Audrey.
The way she talked about how Shadow looked at Laura. She didn't talk about like how they looked at each other. So,
Sure.
so the cues I've gotten so far about this relationship that I don't really know anything about, and maybe I'm a little influenced by the fact that I know she was, having sex with his best friend, but
Right.
there just seems to be a basic imbalance there. So the only way I could, the part of the ring that made sense to me was like that he was super trying to impress her.
I can see that. Certainly.
Yep.
Certainly.
But like,
then we get
Puppy's a funny name. Puppy's a funny name. Puppies follow you around. Puppies are not,
yeah.
especially with such a big man.
Well, see, that's why I would immediately read it as somewhat ironic that Shadow has almost no, puppyish qualities about him. Though again,
except does he not? I mean, to me, he looks super puppyish. Like
Well,
he's a big man
perhaps
trying to
so.
be a small man.
but we don't know again who Shadow was before prison.
No, we don't.
We
We
still
don't.
don't know.
That's
what
true.
The focus of that transformation really was for him. So I find that really interesting. And certainly it makes more sense of the ring because the ring did stand out to me as a little gaudy, a little ostentatious,
Yeah.
and a little inauthentic, almost too
Yes.
conventional for Shadow. And perhaps too conventional for Laura too.
Also,
Yeah.
it seems a little, as a jeweler, when you do one of those rings with the stones all around, if they're not in set, that's actually kind of uncomfortable.
Yes. Yes.
But then
This is like
women's
the
rings
jeweler-
always
this is-
look uncomfortable to me.
Not if they're well made, they're not.
That's
There
right.
you are. DaphneOlive.com.
That's right. Very
Where I don't sell
comfortable
rings anymore, but I used to make rings. Used to make lots of them.
So from there, we then have Shadow finding Laura's cell phone, and he does the worst and most foolish thing a human being can do, looking at someone else's text messages.
Why? Knowing it's the ones with Robbie,
Yeah.
he was just looking
Yeah.
to hurt himself.
No
just
good is coming
self-harm.
from
What are
there.
you doing? Why?
Oh,
And then
come
we
on.
get-
People
Shadow.
can't
I
resist
know they
that
can't
stuff.
resist
That's
it.
just
I
humans
know.
cannot resist that.
And then we get the picture.
Which is just gross, right? Just not attractive. Well, I suppose it speaks to their relationship, which is just sexual, non-romantic, very maybe.
Oh, interesting. Sure. I mean, that would definitely be a hint at it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we're making a lot of assumptions, and there are probably listeners who are like,
It's-
wait a minute, I do this every Wednesday. So,
That's true. Maybe.
so sorry, those listeners. Not really my thing, but
I suppose there's a universe where it's
Love-
romantic and lovely. Sure.
Well, and I think
love,
that there's
love what you love.
I think there's a spectrum there too. This is a startlingly, shockingly, deliberately and provocatively unromantic and unsexy dick pic.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing to recommend, even if taking pictures and sharing them with your significant other or
Sure.
with strangers on the internet is, hey, Anthony Weiner, how you doing? This is the first time anyone's made an Anthony Weiner joke in 6 months, and I'm the guy to do it. That can be your thing, but I think even if that is your thing, this particular picture surely does nothing for you.
I
It's
think so. Yeah.
So prosaic. It's so,
Yeah.
but I mean, we kind of
The
have to
toilet
talk
bowl
about the
brush
fact,
over in the corner. Yeah. It's just not.
we kind of have to talk about the fact that this is the first of 2 erect penises that we will see in the course of today's episode.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is still, television. This is boundary pushing. This is provocative. I guess my question is this. Does it serve a narrative purpose beyond being provocative, beyond causing Starz to write up a whole new thing for the little disclaimer that they show at the beginning of every episode, the little TVMA warning sign that they show you? Is
Oh, did
there
they have a special one for this?
No, they didn't really, but they should have done.
I kind of want
Yes.
one now.
Adult situations, profanity, nudity, terrible dick pics. That could be
Yeah.
just the rundown there. Does it serve a narrative purpose beyond that, or is this just American Gods being shocking and provocative?
Well, I think that it was shocking to Shadow. And I think that's even had there been, love you, babe, can't wait to see you, or even like, I'm so horny, would have been less hard for him to get out of his mind than
Right.
that visual.
Right, which we
So-
see because
which we see, 'cause then it
he
gets
then
replaced.
sees his wedding picture
Right.
turned into that.
Yes.
So I do like that, that it's the worst kind of punishment he could have gotten from going through that string of texts that he should not have done.
It's also the part of Robbie's body which is
ended up
let's say missing in action.
right.
Oh, right.
Because there
oh,
is a
right. I
certain-
forgot about that.
ambiguity to the conversation that Shadow had with Audrey in the first episode about what ultimately happened to Robbie's severed penis, because she says that the coroner had it removed from Laura's mouth, but then its ultimate resting place is unknown and a little ambiguous given the dialogue there. So this is
Interesting.
specifically a token of Laura's death, I suppose.
Sure. That makes sense, especially since we see like no other part of his body at all.
right.
That's interesting.
So having mined that about as far as we possibly can, let's take this opportunity to move on and talk about Shadow then cleaning the house, compulsively
Yes.
cleaning the house. There's another little incidental beat here, I suppose, where he's scrubbing the bathroom floor. This feels like another nod toward book readers, Daphne, because we're told in the book that the first time Laura and Robbie have sex, they have sex on the bathroom floor, which of course TV Shadow doesn't know, but
yeah.
is compulsively scrubbing nonetheless.
Yes. Oh, I like that better.
This
Oh, that makes me happy that they're giving little.
little nods and little
Yeah.
little references here
Yeah.
and there, which I guess we may circle back around to in the show, but I doubt that we will, because the framing of any version of that scene that we get will necessarily be so different that
Right.
I'm not anticipating that that's a spoiler. If it is, I apologize in advance.
What's up with bubbles in this episode?
There are bubbles everywhere in this episode, yes.
I believe there are 3 sets of bubbles. So I was going to ask
it
you,
a freebie?
Alastair. It might be, but I don't know what the hell it's saying. So we get the bubbles in the bath, like close up on bubbles,
Sure.
clear. Second set of bubbles with blood and detergent, and the last set of bubbles are coffee. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
let's. So I don't know. I just wanted to bring it up.
And from there, with Shadow's business at his house concluded, we move outside to just a knockout scene with Wednesday. This is so good, and we get the world's best reveal as the moving truck drives away, and Wednesday's just there.
He is
It's
just
pretty
there.
astonishing. Daphne still good with Ian McShane, still liking his performance. You know,
Yeah, I like
pretty
him. Okay. Yes, last night in our live tweet, I love that Liz referenced the fact that it was that the GIF. My current favorite GIF is the one with him and that dandelion sniffing. Maybe we don't really sniff dandelions; they don't have scent. But yeah, I have questions about the dandelion actually. Mm-hmm. But this goes to this thing I've been talking about the whole thing about anger and getting a rise out of people. Like, this is just so interesting to me, this anger thing, because I feel like Wednesday's giving mixed messages here. Like, he says on the one side that there's a lot to be said for bottling up emotions. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, and then he's like, but now I'm going to tell you something that's going to make you really angry. And he says the thing about how, you don't have to stay sad for very long about your wife.
Yeah.
I'm just so fascinated with this. Like, this tension between, like, what are his intentions towards Shadow? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'm enjoying not knowing, and I'm really that's my favorite puzzle right now, is just like trying to figure that out. And Shadow does not rise to the occasion. He does not do the thing. Like, he does not punch him, and he says, "Thank you for warning me," which is hilarious. Right. So, like, Wednesday did give him an out. It was like Wednesday was like, I just don't understand what's going on, but I love not understanding. Like, I just am looking forward to getting little bits of information that help me understand what's going on between these two people.
It felt very much to me like the scene at the motel in the first episode, where Wednesday is suddenly all gravitas and authority and says, "I will tell you this once and once only. Take all the time you need."
Sure.
It felt like that kind of, I am being almost formally kind and honest to you. Mm-hmm. And given Wednesday's interest in his preoccupation with, the compact, the deal that they have made, it feels like that same kind of formal language to me, and I'm fascinated by it, like you, Daphne, equally fascinated by it. I completely love the way that he is giving what seems to be good advice. He's giving what seems to be genuine kindness, but he's doing it in this austere way that makes you wonder, what his
the hell? And we know he's a con man. I mean, that's the thing. It's like this was set up from the very beginning. You are always going to be asking yourself, what is going on here with Wednesday, because he's been set up for us as a con man.
Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting theme that's running through this episode too, because Wednesday's absolutely been set up as a con man. Bilquis certainly is manipulative. There's an element of deceit and deception there. Anansi, as we meet at the beginning of this episode, not entirely playing fair.
Right. Oh, I did want to bring that up too. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Like, everything he's saying, it's that thing where everything he's saying is true. Mm-hmm. All of the way that he motivates these African slaves to rebel and burn the ship all makes sense. It all works.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's not doing it for them.
No.
So he's also a con man of sorts. Like, this goes back to what I said in the first episode. It's just this whole thing of, like, gods and con men being equated with each other is fascinating to me.
And we'll have the opportunity to question how Chernobog illuminates that or stands in contradiction to that idea.
Absolutely.
We'll get to that in the near future.
Can I ask a question about the dandelion, though?
Please.
Okay, so that's beautiful. I mean, it just Ian McShane. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what he's thinking when he's sniffing or just being thoughtful with that dandelion. And that man is just like, he can just do what would seem like the simplest facial expressions. And you're just like, whoa, what's going on there? There's so much going on, but I don't know what it is, but I really want to know. He's amazing.
He is just incredible.
But then, okay, should I wait for the second part of my question for the car? Like, what happens with the dandelion
No, I guess
seeds?
we can talk about the dandelion. There is a tradition in Celtic cultures, and I think possibly even Norse and Scandinavian cultures too, of dandelions being blown for luck. I remember growing up in the east of Scotland. Is
For us,
that
it's
true?
wishes.
We make
For
a
us,
wish.
wishes. We
Yeah,
make a
we
wish.
make a wish
Okay.
in low dandelion. If you get all the seeds off
Interesting.
the head, then your wish
Oh,
comes
in one
true.
blow?
Yep.
That was okay. So it was basically the same,
Yeah.
the same tradition, and that's really interesting. I think there is also a kind of a sub myth or a sub superstition associated with dandelions that they should be blown at the beginning of journeys for luck.
We do
That's
not
specifically
have that,
associated
right?
with that.
Yeah. So okay.
Oh, that's
yeah,
interesting.
I
we
haven't
don't have that, but that's
looked
that's
into that.
good.
I should look into that and find
Yeah.
out if that's well documented and recorded.
But also, they go up into the sky and make
yes,
lightning.
yes. I wanted to kind of question this because we get a couple of references here that I think may be almost misdirection,
Oh, sure.
because Wednesday is suddenly talking about we're going to get my hammer.
Uh-huh.
And then we have very prominent, thunder and lightning imagery.
Right,
And
exactly.
those are kind of associated with the guy.
Yeah, so I
A
think
guy
they're
of
giving
whom
you
you
like
may
a
have heard.
Thor tease,
Right,
and then
exactly.
It's gonna be the bait and switch.
Exactly. I mean, that's why I was like,
I
is
like
this
that.
like, well, had talked about telegrams. I was like, was he like telegramming his son just now? Like, what's going on here?
Oh, that's darling. Yes.
Yeah, the whole conversation in the car about technology and communication and the disdainful way that he says the information age is
Right.
just beautiful, just beautifully done. Yeah.
Yep.
So the car journey, Elizabeth, is our nod to supernatural this
Yes,
week.
yes,
We get
which I
great
said I
music.
wanted.
We get Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, which is just perfect.
Perfect.
Absolutely
Spot on.
perfect.
Gorgeous.
Not on the, but not too spot on. Not too on the nose, I felt
Heaven
this week.
forbid.
Which is just lovely. You enjoyed this part, I take it?
I did very much. Yeah. This spoke to me quite a lot and made me want to go on a road trip. So although I did, this is nitpicky, but it's clearly winter coming on winter hard in the text
Yeah.
and very lush and green in the actual world. This bothers me a little bit, but it's fine. It's fine. I can move
Does
past that.
it suggest to you this idea of mythic America, where it is always lush and green? We get a couple of
Is
references.
it? Is
in
that
this.
Mythic America, lush and green?
Well, this
depends which part of America you live in.
The Midwest, I
always
think,
thought-
is lush and green. Is that
Oh.
not? It's the land of milk and honey, as we're told. I mean, is there not a sense?
I don't know. I always associated it with, maybe because I'm in Oklahoma, which is like,
Right.
it is the Midwest, but it's the southern half of the Midwest. So like
Yep.
Oklahoma, Texas, we associate with like the grass is parched and yellowed. The trees look a little thirsty. Like there's always you're always almost in a drought or just getting out of a drought or
Which is actually much closer to the biblical land of milk and honey, where
Yes.
Sure.
which is always brown and
Right.
and only green for a tiny portion of the year.
Yeah, but they are
That
for the
portion
north. They're
being
talking
winter,
about
actually.
Yeah, it's true. But they're talking about going up through, Chicago, Wisconsin, Minnesota.
Yep.
You see him
Yep.
talking about those states, and you see there when he's in the store and it's talking about the weather behind him that it's like 40 degrees. So
Right.
Yes.
I don't know. It's fine. It's completely fine. I'm being nitpicky. I'm sorry.
Were it not for the fact that it was supposed to be winter, though, you'd really enjoy the sequence.
Yes.
Good.
Yes. Very much.
I also love the serendipity part.
Oh,
Like,
the
this
no
was-
highways.
The no highways, like this was just a
Yeah.
new. I mean, this is just. I just feel like as much as Ian McShane is my guy, I'm just feeling more and more like Wednesday is my guy. Like,
yeah,
like
sure.
just like the weird firmness and like the caring and not caring combination in really interesting way. And then this just like loving the small things. Like I just feel
Right.
like their car trip parts, both of them are really about. This kind of lovely, and especially right after he interacted with that dandelion, just like he's a guy who just like can live in the moment and get a lot of joy out of it. Like
It certainly
we
seems
had
to be
him
the
in the
case,
motel.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
had,
Sure.
we had
Sure.
I just find that a fascinating thing. Like he's just a really intriguing character. I really am loving learning about Wednesday.
We're breaking down this first half of the road trip, I guess, in reverse chronological order, starting with the
Yeah.
dandelion and going all the
Yeah,
way
I
back
know.
to
Yeah.
where we
I
open
know.
the scene with this conversation about Shadow lacking the personality necessary
Right.
to tell a story, to be an effective trickster. And that's fascinating. This is the part that I was referring to earlier, that in the book, this is internal for Shadow. He's aware of the fact that this is the case. And there
Right.
is possibly some ambiguity in the story, whether or not it's actually true. But
Whether
he
it's
certainly
true,
believes that
it's how he
can't
sees
be,
himself.
he
Yeah.
can't be a
Right,
magician,
and
he's a
Liz brought it
craftsman.
up last episode,
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
that he
right.
used storytelling, not personality, right?
Yeah, well, they kind of fold all of these ideas, and as the show will also fold these ideas when we get to the discussion of charm and charms in the back
Yes.
half of the road trip,
Love
which
that.
is so good. But yeah, this idea that storytelling and personality and charm, that these are the necessary, the necessary virtues of the con man, the necessary virtues of the magician, the necessary virtues of arguably the god. That Shadow doesn't have that. So he can practice the tricks all day, but he's never going to
he can
actually
have the
be able
technical
to.
skill.
Yeah, he doesn't have the razzmatazz necessary to enchant someone.
Razzmatazz. Love it.
For a word that Shadow himself would never, ever, ever
Never
use.
use.
No,
Yeah.
but I would like to hear Wednesday say it now.
Wednesday would totally
Not that
say
it wasn't
Yeah.
lovely to hear you say it, Alastair, but now I want to hear
Thank
Wednesday
you so
say it.
much. So from there we have our brief break, and we get the introduction of Media, the second of
Yes.
the new gods. Gillian Anderson is magnificent,
God.
always and true. I have perhaps never liked her more than I like her in this sequence.
Oh, wow.
As Shadow is walking through what is clearly some kind of knockoff Costco. It's clearly
Yeah.
Yes.
some kind of not quite, but it's close enough.
Also, his shopping technique is fascinating. Like we know he has a list. They had that funny exchange about skimming, where Wednesday assumes he's
Yes,
going to
yes,
skim, and he's like, "I'm not going to steal from you." And he's like, "Well, why should I trust you? Or if
Yeah,
you
if you can't take care of yourself, how are you going to take care of me?
Oh, right, that's what he says, right? Which I loved.
Yes.
I felt like that. I filed that one away for the future. But his shopping, it's like he's got a list, and he'll like kind of like each thing he's kind of like seems to be kind of carefully choosing, and then just like each time he's just piles a bunch of things in.
Yeah. I'm not sure the kind of list that Wednesday gave him. I like the idea
Right.
that Wednesday's list just says 8 romance novels.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Right. It's so interesting. But it's like each time he's like, should I pick? Nah, fuck it. I'm just gonna throw it in. It was just really interesting. I don't know. It just felt like it was like an interesting note in what, about their relationship, which I guess I'm focusing on everything about their relationship because I'm so trying to
Interested.
No, I see it.
unlock it.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
sorry. Back to Gillian Anderson being, oh my God.
Well, I don't know. Did her performance work as well for you guys?
Loved it.
I love her, and I loved it. The more she became Media, I really liked it. I would have liked just a little more Lucille Ball myself, actually. I was looking for that. I loved seeing it. The visual was great, but I would have liked a little facial expression, a little something to just kind of like, I don't know, just to sell it to me a little more, just because I enjoyed
Sure.
that so much when she said, "No, I'm not Lucille Ball, I'm Lucy Ricardo." So I would have liked just a little more Lucy Ricardo, but that's okay.
Oh, see, that's interesting. So for me, it felt like she was being Lucy when she's not being Lucy. Like that she's
Sure.
like that she's being who. So yeah, but you're right. That does conflict with the idea that she's Lucy Ricardo,
Right.
Because she didn't say I'm Lucy Desi Arnaz. She said
Yes.
I'm Lucy Ricardo.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Right. See, for me, that's how I read it. It was that she was like, I'm here's me, and we're behind the curtain. Because
Right.
Lucy Ricardo would also not, offer to show her tits to anyone.
Right. But that's also what made it such a sharp twist at the end, too,
Right.
in the book, I suppose. And
Right.
again, you can't do the comparisons too much, but it did seem strange to me that she would say, "I'm Lucy Ricardo," and not have any kind of Lucy-ness other than
Right.
her.
Not
Right,
do
if
like
you-
the wacky eyes or something
Yeah.
like
Right,
that.
just
Yeah.
something.
Play up
Just,
the Luciness, then you get that
Right.
twist is all the more effective.
Yes.
The
Right.
sucker
Interesting.
punch delivery on that line would work even better. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. I love the almost icy
Yes.
characterization that she has.
Yes.
Oh my
It's-
goodness.
I agree. I would have loved to see
devastatingly
her
effective.
slip into it, but I agree.
Yeah, no,
I loved
yeah,
it.
yeah.
once
I loved when
adjusted.
she pushed the sides of the
Yes.
of the screen open. Absolutely.
And we have, again, we mentioned this a little with our discussion of Technical Boy last week, but we have another new god who is representative of modern technology who is somewhat innately anachronistic.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this also speaks to my slight discomfort with Anansi, because the old gods are supposed to be the old gods. They're supposed to be primal. And yet that, I don't know, there's a tension there that I find really interesting. I'm also confident at this point that that is going to be intentional. that we're going to see some kind of purposeful conflict between our notions of old and new, perhaps, that there may be some kind of tension there that I can't wait to explore. This entire sequence works for me. Daphne, you mentioned earlier that this is one of the moments where we start questioning Shadow's specialness, that we start wondering what it is about him. What do you think of the job offer?
I don't understand the job offer, first of all.
Neither does he. Yeah, I think that's all right.
Exactly. Well, I don't know if I have an answer for that question exactly specifically. There were other things I focused on about this and the diner conversation afterwards. But right. I mean, you just have to start asking now, like, what's up? Although for me, this one still, I filed in my thing about the question of Shadow's potential specialness or seeming specialness. I filed this more with Technical Boy, like that this is something that's happening in relation to Wednesday, not necessarily about Shadow specifically himself.
Right.
And if anything, she actually kind of countered that because she at the end she talks about like how like these things always end up in a suicide. So she actually made Shadow sound like he's one in a long line of people who have been in this position.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I didn't necessarily associate that with his relationship with Wednesday, but rather with his, just coming right out of jail, lost his wife, just being in the depths of despair, as it were.
Possibly just someone who is being touched by gods. Someone who is
So that's how I saw it. That's how I saw it. Is that somebody?
That's what she's saying, I
right?
Think, yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
Very
that's
interesting.
And then again, we have help him keep his neck out of the belt. So we have hanging again, but now self-inflicted. Hanging referenced.
It is interesting, I think, that we could see a contrast here between Media and Technical Boy, in that Technical Boy was all bluster and threat and blunt force, but of course Media is seductive. We have to, and not just the character, but the abstract concept of media, I suppose. We have to lean forward to engage with it. We have to want it in order for stories to work, in order for entertainment to work. We have to want to pay attention to it. So Media acting in a more seductive aspect, I think,
way more
works
sophisticated.
very well for me. Yeah,
way more sophisticated. Because like Media Boy, again, he had that kind of poser thing. He was like just really feeling insecure in relation to Wednesday. Whereas Media's just like, she's smart. She's complimenting Shadow. She's saying, she said, Media Boy underestimated you. They're all underestimating you. I wouldn't do that. Like she's really, she understands what she's doing.
Yeah.
And so I felt like that put her more in the grouping with Wednesday as someone who knows how to play people.
And she certainly seems less impressed by Wednesday, or less afraid of Wednesday, I suppose.
Yes, exactly.
Because Technical Boy, for all his bluster, is clearly very focused on Wednesday. Right. Whereas Media gets that brilliant line, we're tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. He's not even yesterday anymore.
Yeah,
that's so good. And speaks so powerfully to that idea of the ever-changing world, the ever-changing media landscape, I guess. It's just fantastic. This, I think, for all that I love the opening and for all that I love the end of the episode, this might be the high point of the episode for me. And I know that I'm alone in that. That's fine. That's good.
That's okay. Yeah.
See, for me, it's the next scene. For me, it's the diner. The diner is the high point.
Let's get to the
me.
diner.
Oh,
Daphne, take us through the diner.
Okay, so first of all, I'm fascinated that we've had this thing with Shadow where crazy shit's happening to him and he barely is reacting. I mean, he's reacting kind of sometimes, like he gets a little angry after, at the beginning, after the lynching situation. But basically considering all the stuff he's seen in the past, 2 days, he's barely reacted. So I find it fascinating that the point where he super starts reacting is not just crazy God stuff, but the thing that actually references to something that's familiar to him.
Yeah.
The thing that totally throws him is Lucille Ball.
Yeah.
Is the fact that I Love Lucy was talking to him. Not that all the stuff that Wednesday's done, the coins, just none of that.
Interesting. Yeah.
I Love Lucy. That's what makes him go, holy shit, what's going on here? Am I crazy?
Well, and I wonder if there's a connection there with his childhood. I mean, growing up in this media culture, there's no way to avoid that association. There's no way to avoid that primary connection. That would be something that speaks to Shadow, not only of Lucille Ball, but of himself. This is something from his past.
I would be super disturbed if Lucy just offered to show me her tits. Honestly. That would just like throw everything I know about the world into turmoil.
So, sure, for a number of reasons at this point, yes.
So, but yeah, and I love this this conversation. This is so my thing. This conversation they're having about madness. This is my happy place right here. This conversation that they're having of like, what is reality? And like, I just love all of Wednesday's answers. And unlike when we talked about Black Sails, I didn't write the whole conversation down, but I just found it really interesting. And then we get into this thing of Wednesday saying, the universe has singled you out. And saying that's better than being ignored.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Shadow's like, no, I would love to be ignored. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
So like that goes to everything I feel like I've learned about Shadow up until now. And then Wednesday says it's better to be dead than forgotten. And no one's ever going to forget you. And this is the moment where I'm really like, okay, Shadow is something. I don't know what he is, but he's something.
Clearly important. Yeah, there are very prominent conversations in the book which haven't happened yet in the show, which speak directly to these themes and ideas. So I guess what we should probably do is put a pin in that and circle back around to it next week when I'm sure that we'll explore it a little more consciously and a little more deliberately. But Daphne, you're absolutely right. This is very important. And I don't want to preempt that conversation when we get there.
Right. No, sure.
So,
but this was the moment where I understood that Shadow is important in his own right, not just as someone an employee of Wednesday.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Also, I love strange is the new language and we're vocabulary building.
Mm-hmm.
Vocabulary building in particular stood out to me.
Loved that.
So good. And it works for me in two distinct ways. The first is simply narrative, that every story teaches you how to understand it.
Right.
Every story leads you by the hand so that you can familiarize yourself with it and so it can communicate itself to you. And that is literally what is happening to Shadow right now. It's what's happening to us too, of course, as we're watching the show. But this is literally what's happening to Shadow. He is being equipped with a vocabulary so that he can define and describe the world around him and somehow frame his own experience. That's just lovely. But it also speaks to Technical Boy last week. That language is a virus, that we're rewriting the code. That this idea that our means of understanding the world, our means of communicating with each other, our means of framing myth and metaphor and abstract idea, that these things themselves are mutable, that is enormously powerful.
Well, are they mutable for everyone? Because I feel like vocabulary building is Wednesday saying there is a vocabulary and I'm drawing, like he said when he was with the sisters, he says I'm bringing him in slowly. I felt like Wednesday's attitude about it is that the vocabulary exists and you're in the process of learning versus Technical Boy saying it's all bullshit. We can change this whenever we want.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure that we have enough to be definitive about that yet, but you're right. There are potentially at least two aspects. And that potentially throws forward to the scene that we'll get in Chicago where we get the brilliant line, I'm above learning. That I don't need to expand myself. This is simply what I am. And again, we're getting a tension between gods and those who are not. I love this diner scene so very much, not least of all, Elizabeth, because this feels like a real diner.
It does.
This felt grimy and a little gross and a little real. Did that work for you?
It did. Yeah. And it disappeared behind them, which I also liked quite a lot. Yeah, as it should, as a good diner should.
Yep, exactly.
So then back in the car, we have some conversation about charm. And charms, as I said, we get hard rain's going to fall, which is lovely.
Good.
Yeah, I just want to bring up the last line, which I think I joked last night in the live tweet. Could be because I have our thesis statement thing.
Oh, sure.
That I love. Yeah, in addition to loving Wednesday's whole very matter-of-fact and cryptic view of madness and reality and what is real and all of that, he says at the end, there are bigger sacrifices one could make than going a little mad. And so this, I feel like, is the midpoint in this theme that's happening of submission and sacrifice.
Yes, yeah.
And
that's very strong. Yes.
Yeah.
It's super strong because I feel like Shadow is going through a process here. He's going through a process of submitting. I mean, I think that's what we see near the end is
certainly
And so this is kind of the midpoint of that, like that he had the shock that made him start going down this road of submission.
Excellent. So from there, we move back into the car and we get this discussion of charm and charms, the very specific application of those two words, which it's really good. It's
Very
really,
sharp.
really
I
good.
liked it.
We get Hard Rain's Gonna Fall playing as we move away from the car. And then we get what I have in my notes described as a weird cosmic interlude. What do we make of this traveling through space, somewhat psychedelic, somewhat naked dude sequence?
Which is also the internal of Bilquis, like we come out her vagina. I experienced that correctly. Yes.
Yes.
Right. It's like the universe. I mean, I read that as the universe, like, because he's obviously inside her on some level, right?
The universe
so it's
within
like
her. Yes.
Yeah, that's how I saw it, as the universe within her. Because it also had some like the shapes that ended up with the stars like got super Georgia O'Keeffe by the end.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about this choice. I think it's weird. I think
it's weird too. It doesn't really do anything for me.
It doesn't do anything for me.
How do you feel about this sequence
specifically
coupled
blissed
with
out
the Bilquis sequence then? Because we get this montage of Bilquis subsuming.
Then why weren't there more people in her space?
I don't think they're literally hanging out in there.
Right.
Well,
I think that was metaphorical.
Just so
you want them to be having a party inside?
No. Well, like if it was this idea of like all of these souls she had consumed that were now just like in this cosmic blissed out state, that works a little more for me, especially if she's gathering strength.
Right.
Okay.
But I guess they were just trying to help me see the visual. I don't know. It didn't.
Yeah.
I said, just didn't work. It didn't work.
Right. This for me is one of those things where it's like I didn't like it, but I can, because we're studying this to talk about it. I like tried to find intellectual things about it that worked for me intellectually. So one, I liked that it tied Wednesday to Bilquis, because we basically went from Wednesday scene through weirdness to out Bilquis. So that felt like it tied them together somehow.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, the other thing was I felt like since we were just talking about madness and sacrifice, I felt like this was a message saying, you know what? Sacrifice, pretty awesome for the person sacrificed. Like, it's like, let's check in. Let's check in with our first willing sacrifice of our story and like see what's up with him. And he seems pretty happy with himself. So
seems fine. Sure.
Right. Oh, I would say
but
maybe more than
guy
fine.
From the first episode, right? This was just some.
No, that's the guy from the first episode.
Oh, I didn't. Okay,
I'm pretty sure. I mean,
I don't think so. You were wrong about Jack.
I know. We're gonna.
I don't think so. I think this was a totally different.
It's him?
I think this guy looked totally different. This guy had much darker hair and.
Okay,
yeah,
but then it's just weird. Why would they?
That's
have
why
a
I
different
thought
guy?
it was really weird.
Alastair, where do you come down on this? Same guy, different guy.
No, I thought it was a different guy, but.
No way.
I thought so.
Okay,
but
then
it could be
really makes no sense.
It was also like slightly weird, heightened CGI version of the guy. So, and the way that the CGI is handled and exaggerated throughout the show, I'm not at all sure. But we'll check the tapes and get a definitive ruling on this, I think.
Yeah, I don't have to apologize to anyone like I had to in Fathom's Deep, because it doesn't really matter. But
that's true.
Yeah, an unnamed guy swallowed by Bilquis. I don't need to say anything to him. But okay, if it's not him, so let me just say this: if it's him,
it works for me more.
Right. If it's him, it works for me more. But it doesn't really. But like, it has a kind of one note that works for me intellectually. But yeah, it doesn't really work for me.
It also doesn't work for me coupled with the Bilquis montage sequence because we are connected with her. We're present with her and with her sexuality and physicality and power. So the somewhat abstract cosmic sequence seems to kind of push back against that because she is about presence and physicality in a way that this, somewhat
I think all of the
1970s
gods
Jack
are.
Kirby sequence isn't quite doing it for me.
I think all the gods are. I like living with them in our world. And
sure,
I don't,
yeah.
the dandelion to thunderclap, I remember lightning, didn't bother me in the same way because it still felt very physical, even if it maybe was hinting at something.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But so that I liked, but I like that all of them were, I mean, they're bound by, kind of hilarious things. Like Odin needs to wear hats and, I mean, they're like bound and not bound, but that tension's really interesting as long as we're in our world, even if it's a slightly heightened and weird version of our world. But the minute you go like full on, psychedelic weirdness, it just doesn't have meaning for me anymore.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's fair. We do move into the Bilquis montage sequence as she is absorbing person after person.
Right.
We get the sense that she is building her strength, I guess, though you're right, Elizabeth. We don't necessarily have concrete evidence to point to that suggests that's the case, right?
And in fact, larger and larger in relation to them from the camera angles and stuff. Like she seemed really giant by the end.
There are a couple of shots, actually, because we discussed this last week, where if the person that she is absorbing is growing smaller, then we should, narratively speaking, have her larger.
Right.
That would work visually a little better. And we do get some hints of that. There are a couple of shots here that work better for me, but overall the sequence still doesn't quite work. I still don't feel like we've really nailed this special effect.
Yeah.
You're looking at uncomfortable and somewhat unimpressed, Elizabeth.
No, well, that might be how I feel about the Bilquis sequence in general. Yes. No, I loved all of the people coming in. And the diversity of people that came in.
Yes, I like the diversity of it very much.
And that they all did seem to be, like you saw that worshipfulness, that they were very engaged, not just, sexually, but engaged in this worship of her. So that worked for me very much. And I didn't, every time we cut to the special effect, which we did it twice, I think, we had the man and the woman, it makes it more... I don't know, comical, I suppose. I lose some of the sacredness of the worship. But
you have to see them be enveloped.
I'm not sure that you do again.
No, otherwise you wouldn't. I mean, you all read the books. If I didn't see them actually being drawn into her body, I would not understand that that's what's happening.
Having seen it the first time in the last episode, did you feel that you needed to see it again?
Oh, no, I didn't. Well, okay, I have one point about needing to see it again, and I think this is an interesting point. Like, I love the diversity on many levels. I loved that, again, this is about worship related to spiritual / physical manifestation of love. So I love that those two, I'm just going to say love way too many times. I appreciated that those two are tied together. And then in addition to that, I appreciated then we get to see that involves all forms of love, that all forms of physical / spiritual love, that it's not a heteronormative thing, that it's all types of people. I also, for me, it was important to see a woman who seems to be climaxing while she's being drawn in. Because that's something with heterosexual intercourse, you would be like, okay, well, in the first episode, I was like, oh, well, of course he's climaxing because they're having intercourse while he's climaxing, and that's what's drawing him. So seeing that a woman is also climaxing while being drawn into her body,
we're challenging that.
Right. Well, it is right. It is so. It shows that the being drawn into her body as part of this worship, that the sacrifice isn't itself a means for some sort of physical / spiritual climax. That it doesn't have to do with penetration, right?
Yeah.
Or penetration in the way that we experience.
Exactly. Right.
It is penetrating. It's really hard to describe. But I thought that in addition to showing all the variants of people who can have sex with each other and have love with each other, that was actually really important for me to understand that the climaxing had to do with the being drawn into her body.
Yeah.
No, I think we're all in agreement that the sequence is powerful and that we like Bilquis as a character. I think we're just differing on where we land on the visual
exact
effect
special
of it.
effect.
Yeah.
I think the visual effect, it reminds me too a little bit of like the old like Jason and the Argonauts. There's something almost claymation-y about
Right.
it that just kind of throws me out every time, which is too bad because and I think that's why it bothers me so much, is because I'm so engaged and I'm so compelled by this particular part of the storytelling and by this kind of worship and idolatry. And it's, I don't know. I wish it.
Sometimes
I wish
a
it was a
near
home
miss-
run.
Yeah, a near miss can be worse
Yes,
than a
right.
complete
exactly.
failure sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we have Bilquis apparently shedding a tear. We have an ambiguous,
This is beautiful.
emotional moment from
Right.
her here. How did you guys read that? And I guess we should probably link it forward to the next scene when she visits the museum. How did you read her emotional state in that moment?
I suppose I read it as a kind of loneliness and despair that she had come to this. That this was the way in which she had to manipulate and fool her way into worshipers, that they didn't come to her anymore.
That really works for me. I couldn't quite figure. I mean, I noticed it, but I couldn't quite figure it out. That totally worked. I like that way of looking at it.
And then
Right,
we get
because it's not what she once had.
right. And then we get the fragmentary scene in the museum, which I guess we'll just return to when we get more of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't
Yes.
really enough there to speculate about, I suppose.
No, but
except
it's intriguing.
It's
intriguing,
wildly intriguing.
But I
yes.
don't know
Yeah.
what's happening. Yep.
Yeah.
But that is the moment when we transition to Chicago, when we get our little, Indiana Jones red line on the map.
Which was pretty great, actually. I like that. And then the key going in, that was all very fun.
The music throughout this is
God, it's so good.
fantastic.
So good.
This slow and mournful East European cello notes and bass notes just rolling around the soundscape of the series is astonishing for me. Elizabeth, do you want to give us an introduction to Zoraya Verchenaya?
Well, I liked her from the get-go. It's Cloris Leachman, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, that which actually took me just a second to wrap my head around because I wasn't expecting to recognize her, I suppose. But I love how antiquated her clothing is very much. And that she herself seems very... Modern isn't the right word. Daphne, I think you're going to have a lot to speak into this. She is just on point. She is a perfect caricature of that woman, of the old Eastern European immigrant woman. She is perfect.
Daphne?
Okay, let me just say, my family's Polish. My husband's family's Russian. My grandparents came from Poland. Like, I know this lady.
Yeah.
I know this lady. I love this lady. It's really nice to visit with this lady again because I don't actually have them in my life anymore. She's so spot on. She's so like, and it's it's going to be interesting for me because it was like very hard for me. I mean, one, this was so much fun for me. Also, Gemini Jade, we were like totally freaking out together last night on the live tweet because we're both clearly from this. But I did not grow up with this mythology. Like, my family's Jewish from Poland. I know nothing about any of this mythology. It was never mentioned to me. I know nothing. So it was like really interesting for me. I did look them up on Wikipedia.
Fair.
So it was really interesting because all of this stuff resonates for me as perfect, spot on references to Eastern European immigrants. Full on. I mean, for me, it's to the U.S. For my husband, it's Russia to Israel. But like the clothing, the lace, the crystal, the daintiness of the cups, the like just everything, the East-West thing. I mean, it's so perfectly Russian or Polish. Like, it's just, I mean, especially Russian. I mean, it just felt like this is not what my in-laws' house looks like. Their house is a little less shabby, but there is this like really glorious thing of like the wood and the dainty, fancy stuff together, and the part of what I loved about her character. And again, I can't parse now like what's supposed to be her God stuff and what's supposed to be her Russian stuff, but like that really like very direct way of speaking, like the almost the seemingly cynical but really just like really based in realism way of thinking and talking.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah. I mean, okay, None of the old ladies I hung out with would ever drink straight from the vodka bottle, or actually admittedly drink from the vodka bottle, because in our world, men drink the vodka and women drink other things. But other than that, it just felt super, really fun for me. Oh, and the gifts. Like that was a thing.
Yes.
You do not show up at a house without gifts, like especially food gifts. So I was like, oh, I don't know. Is he making an offering, or is this just like him understanding that they're Eastern European?
Yeah.
Right. I don't know which one it is.
The world's largest wheel of cheese. I brought you some Havarti. I'm like, I know. Come over to my house Wednesday.
Oh my goodness. No, that all totally worked for me. And I just didn't know. I didn't know if this is, he obviously has known them forever.
Right.
Yeah. I was interested in the gift giving, partly because of this, Slavic tradition, and partly because it felt to me like the mead. It feels as though Wednesday is a person who observes the formalities of things, who understands that there's a right way that things should be done, and then does things that way. And that's either, of course, a function of his respect for tradition and courtesy.
Oh, also bringing someone cigarettes. That's totally a thing.
Or it's a means of outright manipulating people by appearing to observe courtesy and tradition.
Well, and there's a fine line between those two things, and that's a lovely thing to show up. Like the whole thing about politeness is a form of manipulation.
Interesting.
Especially when you're dealing with people who are, I mean, this is something that has always fascinated me with Russians, is that they do actually are really, really, really into all of these kind of ritualistic politenesses. Sure. And also they're just like super, super direct talkers when they get down to it. Like, so it's a really interesting, it's not like other cultures where it's like those two things seem to coincide, that that they're like, there's a lot of rituals of politeness, but also really indirect speech modes.
Sure.
But Russians have always fascinated me in particular. And again, I've spent a lot of time with Russians in the past 20 something years, of this weird juxtaposition of like all of these rituals combined with like super, super direct speak when you get down to it.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting opposition. I think you're right, as opposed to more ostentatiously performative cultures of courtesy and politeness, because when you strip away any kind of euphemism from the observation of tradition, the observation of courtesy, then the tradition itself becomes more important. It becomes more symbolically important. You're not doing this as a placeholder for something else. This is just how things are done. And there's a cultural focus there that I find really enchanting and absolutely true, I think, to what we've seen of Wednesday in the show so far. That seems to be consistent with his character. I absolutely believe that he genuinely likes the Zorayas. I'm not so sure that he likes Chernobog, but when he's flirting with her in particular.
Oh my God, that is my favorite thing. The two of them flirting is so good. It's so good.
Extraordinary. Just extraordinary.
I just want to hang out with the two of them and drink vodka.
Who doesn't?
Instead, you're hanging out with the two of us drinking scotch. Is it today, Daphne? You're drinking scotch at 11 a.m.?
I am not, but I did drink scotch last night.
Elizabeth, do you have any kind of grounding in this mythological tradition? Have you read Slavic myths? Did you know of
Nothing
Chernobog?
at all. No, this is all brand new to me, and I am not doing my research. I am letting the story tell itself. So
interesting.
I know nothing.
So the Zorayas, Chernobog, are you enchanted?
I am absolutely enchanted and very engaged. And again, it's one of my favorite parts of the book so far. So I hate that they haven't gotten to the scene on the roof that is coming. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I like every bit about it. I want more of it. I'm very interested with there was a bear in the picture,
the Ursa Major.
That's what I thought was Ursa Major, right? So we've got.
So is it Ursa Major? Because I read that they're associated with Ursa Minor. That's what Wikipedia told me.
Could have been Ursa Minor then. See, I don't know.
It could have been.
Which makes sense because that's the female Ursa.
It would make sense. Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Yes. So I like all of it very much, but I know nothing about it.
Right.
Going in cold.
Oh, I also love that she says when they're talking about the fortune telling. Which is that she says the truth is not what people want to hear. So again, we're again bringing this to like truth and not truth and conning.
Yes.
Like that she makes money from fortunes, but he says, but you don't tell the truth.
Yeah.
Tell the prettiest lies. I
Right.
guess.
Oh, that's what he says. Oh, God, I love him.
Yep.
Well, and then we get another beat of Shadow's capability and familiarity in this world, because later he's not taken in by the fortune at all.
No.
He completely
Oh,
understands the
man.
mechanics of the con.
Right.
Right.
Which
the
is-
faces they make terrified me.
Yes.
Not
yes.
good. Yeah, they terrified him too. That bad, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I loved how much Shadow kept on offering to help also,
I
which is
know.
his very like American politeness. Like this is
Yep.
like a good Midwestern good old boy. It's like, oh no, let me help you in the kitchen. Let me do whatever I
Right.
can
I
do.
will
And-
kill you.
Yes,
Right.
I will murder you.
See, no, and I
Do
love
not
that
touch.
too.
Which
no,
is very
and I
true.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that like do not mess with an old Eastern European lady when she's trying to like take care of you.
And get dinner. Yes, yes. Mhm.
So we'll be able to talk a little more about Zoraya's next week. We should probably,
So
I
looking
don't know,
forward to.
take a minute and talk about Chernobog. We get this
my
incredibly
goodness.
powerful introduction to his character.
We sure
break
do.
the narrative frame again. We get this cutaway to him in the field as
Yeah.
he kills the cow with the bolt gun, which
And
is
makes
going
and
to...
makes and makes a line about organic.
Yes, yes.
Which also media did.
Right, exactly. This is one of the totems of the modern world, I guess.
Right.
We'll come back around to the idea of the bolt gun when he says later, every monkey with a thumb can kill.
Oh God! And the way he puts his hand on his face
Yes.
to like go. Oh, and that noise
Yes.
that he makes.
Uh-huh.
Oh God!
That's
Way more gruesome
completely-
than that hammer. I gotta say.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, is that this is one of the tensions, I think, between, the craft and the technology. That in the craft, it takes strength, yes, but it also takes skill, and there is a dedication there. And even if your job is to cleave in the skulls of cows with a sledgehammer, there's still a purpose to that. There's a kind of a sanctity to that in an odd kind of way. When you disassociate the act itself from the commission of the act, when it's just a button on a bolt gun and anyone can do it and there's no craft or artistry to it, this, I think, is one of the tensions that we're going to see between the old world and the new world, one of the tensions between the old gods and the new gods, because we have stripped away that sanctity is, I think, the wrong word, but we've stripped away that more spiritual aspect
Right, the
of the work
connection.
itself. Yes, that you're right. Connection is exactly the word. That interconnectivity between all of these people doing all of these things, and even the most humble of these things has a value and a place and a purpose. We've kind of stripped that away through the application of technology, and that's why technology is impersonal. It's why it is cold. It's why Chernobog, for all of his awfulness, the black god of Slavic myth, for all of his disquieting, character quirks and affectations, there is still a warmth to him. There's still oddly a humanity to
A
him.
humanity, sure.
That we don't
Yeah.
get from Technical Boy, that we don't get from
Right.
media.
Oh no, I love him.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a stunning performance.
Like
It
he's
is a
actually
stunning performance.
and for me, he's the flip side. Like I've hung out with a lot of like seemingly cranky but kind of warm Russian dudes.
Yep.
I love that archetype, and I love the way that Chernobog refuses to be fixed on either side of that line. Is he actually a dangerous lunatic, or
Right.
is he actually playing the part of a dangerous lunatic
Right.
because he is a crusty old Russian guy? Is there a heart
I
of
love
gold beneath, or is there a pit of roiling darkness?
Right.
I'm still on the edge as we
Well, and he
come to
says
the
now
end of
we
the episode.
when he's talking about his brother, he says now we both have gone gray.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that that's in the show, because that is literally one of my favorite passages from the entire book.
Gorgeous.
I
Yeah.
completely love it. And it speaks to, well, okay, I want to throw this out as a possible topic, as a possible theme for this show. And it's the way in which black is being used in a much broader sense than it's normally used. We have Anansi right at the beginning telling these people in the hold of the Dutch ship, you don't even know you're black. You're just
Right.
people.
Right.
You're going to be black. You're going to be rendered black, but only in opposition to the white Dutchmen who have taken you. Now we
Well,
have
that they
Chernobog.
have taken whiteness too. That
Yeah,
they
exactly.
they
They have
basically
claimed it.
they
Yes.
claimed whiteness, so they're
Yes.
making you
Yes.
black.
So when we're talking about race, one of the things that I'm most interested in so far in American Gods is the way in which race is much larger than actually just race. The way it's being almost abstracted out to other sets of dualistic oppositions, whether that's Chernobog and his brother Bilobog, whether that's, light and dark, whether it's checkers pieces, whether it's obviously good and evil is going to be very tempting, the old and the new, the idea of blackness. There was a response on Twitter during the live tweet last night to the last line of the episode, in which Chernobog says to Shadow, "A shame, you're my only black friend."
Yeah.
And the response on Twitter, most of the response on Twitter, was not positive. It was felt, I think, and I would hate to paraphrase this, but it was felt, I think, that this was playing into stereotypes of racist characters. And I'm not at all sure that I'm I'm in agreement there, because Chernobog throughout has identified himself as black, not ethnically black, not racially black, not physically black the way that Shadow is, but he has identified a core blackness to his identity that he clearly sees echoed in
Shadow.
Yeah, that actually possibly also has nothing to do with Shadow's race.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, also possibly does. We haven't really pinned down the nature of that yet. Is there anything to this, Daphne? Is there anything to this kind of blackness, whiteness as concepts that go beyond race? And that as a thematic landscape for
I mean,
American
this
gods.
It's interesting because this episode started by basically saying that race is something that's defined by people. I mean, I think that's a huge part of the message of Anansi is like, you became a race called black because someone decided that we needed to divide people. Yeah. And that part of that choice was for the sake of subjugation. I don't know what to say about this yet because I don't know where the story is going. Like there is dangerous waters when you start equating black and white racial groups with the ideas of good and bad. I mean, that's always been a interesting thing / dangerous thing, the idea of making, black be bad and white be good. Although if they're saying like black, that those two things are connected in a way that actually is really cool politically, of saying you were made black, you were chosen by this group because basically they had more power than you, or they got there first and got to be the ones that, set the rules of the game. So they defined you as bad. Like that's an interesting way to take this very dangerous association that has been made and say, and put the blame and the origin of that problematic thing in the right part of the storyline. Right. I don't know yet where, that's interesting. So like could both the two bookends of this episode basically both be saying that these things are arbitrary and defined by other people, which isn't to say that being arbitrary doesn't mean that it doesn't have, often disastrous implications historically for the people who get defined, people for whom of whom the story is told, but saying that these things are things that were chosen by someone else and imposed on us.
Yeah, no, I think
interesting.
That's where I'm coming down on it. This is, of course, we were critical of the treatment of race and racial iconography in the first episode. I'm much more positive about it now. The third episode could reset me right back to the beginning.
Exactly. I mean, I feel like this is all super up in the air for how I feel about.
But there are certainly some interesting associations and what must be a great deal of intentionality, because there's no way that all of these themes echo through the episode, in such a companionable and compatible way, unless it is intentional. Right. So the show is clearly striving to say something, whether that thing will be as fully developed, as politically and socially nuanced, as, just foundationally respectful as we would like it to be. That remains to be seen. Yeah, absolutely. There is at least some interest here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Can we talk about submission?
Please. Because Shadow will be on his knees.
Well, he won't just be on his knees. We had a whole thing about how he had to agree to this, that Wednesday said you don't have to do this, and Shadow decided to do this. Like this whole idea of a willing sacrifice is huge in this part of it, which again brings us back to the beginning. But what's interesting here, is that now it's not really about getting a rise out of him. I mean, you could say that when he starts saying, "Oh, you're black," like that, he could, but I don't think that that's what Chernobog is trying to do. I don't think he's trying to get a rise out of him. But yeah, I mean, there's just like layers here in the introduction of this checkers game of like ritualistic necessity for someone to be a willing sacrifice. And it's interesting because I feel like, especially in relation to Bilquis, like especially what you just said, Liz, about her being maybe a little sad that this isn't happening the way it should. Like this might be exactly, again, Shadow's, he's being brought into this world. What Wednesday said, I'm easing him in. And he had this shock with media. So this might be exactly the kind of sacrifice that the gods want. And Wednesday doesn't really want him to do it, although he doesn't. I mean, that also might be part of it, is that Chernobog says, like, this isn't up to you, right? Because this has to be a willing sacrifice.
Well, the degree to which Shadow is willing, the degree to which Shadow is capable of being willing is really interesting.
But he references specifically, he's like, okay, at the end, he's like, okay, if this is a world where I Love Lucy talks to me and all this crazy shit's going on, then fine.
And he agrees to play the game, but I think it's really important. The last move of the game is so symbolically powerful because Shadow is backed into a corner. He has no choice. You have to make a move in checkers. You can't choose not to. And whichever move he makes of the two possible moves, he's done. Which ties back to his idea earlier when they're talking about fortunes that we're all fucked. Playing the odds is, fortune telling is just playing the odds.
Which also goes to what Anansi says, that basically we mortals are all just dead anyway.
Yeah.
Like, do we ever really make a willing sacrifice to a god when they are immortal and we are mortal? And we're just fucked. I mean, basically, like, can't this is always going to be an uneven relationship between a god and a mortal. And in here, I mean, obviously we see that it has more nuance because we see Wednesday sometimes really trying to make Shadow happy. So there is some give and take in it, obviously, in this world. But right. It was just like, but we see in the span of this game, like Chernobog says in the beginning, like he says, I'm taking first blood. And he says, so you're going to lose. And so Shadow actually starts this game saying, well, wait a minute, we just started.
Right.
And Chernobog talks about his confidence. So he actually goes through this like mini arc in the span of the game, basically, of going from confident, the world is open, I have opportunities, this could go either way, to at the end going, shit, it's just like this, here I am. I'm up against forces I can't understand or control.
Right. And one of the ways in which checkers is so metaphorically powerful, and shares this with chess, of course, is that you are compelled to make a move. That from the beginning of the game, you have to move, you have to keep moving. So when he gives up his first piece to Chernobog, and first blood is claimed, that is, in a sense, Shadow's fault. He has to make a move, but that's the move he chose.
Right.
So there is, the interplay of voluntary action and involuntary action, the interplay between,
and sacrifice. He sacrificed his first piece.
Sure. Because he was compelled to. So
right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
There's a real tension and interest there. Elizabeth, how did the checkers game work for you?
First of all, I thought it was beautifully done.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the song underneath it? The coffee and the spoon,
Yes.
and the bitter
Goodness.
coffee and sweet.
The secret of the spoon.
The secret of the spoon. It was gorgeous and haunting. And I'm still stuck on the conversation earlier of this idea that last line that he says, "It's too bad you're my only black friend." I think you're absolutely right. It's I think what he's saying is, it's too bad you were also told you were born bad. I think that the whole sequence is so rich and so nuanced and subtle. And it, pacing wise, was strange because it was so slow that it really shocked me when we went to credits. I wasn't prepared for that because it felt like a mid sequence. It felt like it should be in the middle somewhere, which isn't to say that it wasn't climactic, because of course it was, just that the pacing was so slow and that the song was so haunting, that it was, I don't know, when it went to credits, it was almost, even though the screen went dark, it was as though someone flicked a light switch on. All of a sudden, it was bright again in the room, and I was very surprised by it. Gosh, I think it's gorgeously done. I do hate that it cut off in the middle. I feel like I wish I could have. Had I been binge watching this, there's no way I would have gone to bed. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
For me, it didn't feel like cutting off in the middle. It felt like the end of this. Because I don't know what's coming next,
right.
so I don't have a sense of like.
And it is fair to say, I think that the scene that takes place at the end of this chapter is maybe your favorite scene, maybe second to the Bilquis scene.
Hard to say, but second to Bilquis. I think second to Bilquis.
Oh
so
wow,
far.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. Well, though, of course, we have no idea if that scene is even going to be included in the show, or if it's going
or
to play
how
out the
it'll
same
play.
way.
Right. Yeah. It was
Right.
beautifully done by Neil Gaiman, but in the adaptation, who knows?
Right. See, for me, this felt like a perfect ending because of the sacrifice, because we had reached this place.
Right.
Yeah, and we've tracked Shadow's voluntary entry into this world that he is now choosing to believe. He's now choosing to invest. He's not being manipulated into the game or into the wager, more importantly.
Right. He clearly doesn't completely understand what's going on, but he understood well enough to be a willing sacrifice, I think, to some extent. I mean, Alastair, you make great points about how much that is ever possible, but to some extent, much more than any point up until now, he has chosen something with some level of knowing.
Right. And it's interesting that it's Wednesday who generally puts the focus on Shadow's mindfulness and awareness. He's there saying, you don't have to do this. Actually, this is a choice. You can choose not to do this. You can choose not to be angry about Laura and Robbie anymore. You can let that go. You can choose to drink the meat and to make the compact. We can amend the compact and I will pay you exorbitant hazard pay.
Right.
It does seem that to Wednesday and Wednesday alone, potentially, Shadow's willing and informed complicity is necessary. That he wants his consent, and that's potentially crucial, at least.
Right. Well, again, and this is totally a mythology thing. This is totally a ritual thing.
Yeah.
Right.
This is very, very, very much a ritual thing, especially with sacrifice.
And it does suggest that when we see Anansi demanding his sacrifice, when we see Bilquis manipulating and luring her sacrifices, that we're not ever allowed, even this early in the story, to fall into the trap of thinking, well, the old gods are the good guys and the new gods are the bad guys.
No,
which again challenges that idea of black and white, this idea that we are all become gray.
Well, and again, like I said last episode, I think jokingly, but it's totally serious, is like gods, we revere them and we fear them, and that's correct.
Yes. Yeah. That's a powerful idea.
Yeah.
I'm so hooked. I'm so hooked by this show. I can't wait. And then when we cut to credits, literally the only thing that took the sting for me out of cutting to credits at the end of the checkers sequence is that we got some more of the music.
Some more of that great music.
I will be fine.
Really
there has to be some kind of American Gods official soundtrack that I will listen to on Spotify when I'm writing from now on, because it's just breathtaking.
Yeah.
That, I think, will do it for our discussion of The Secret of Spoons. We are going to be back next week to talk about Head Full of Snow, the third episode of American Gods. I'm very excited.
Yes.
I'm very excited, you guys. I know a little bit about what's coming because of the trailer that I saw and because of the next part of the book. And I'm very excited.
All right.
As we sit here poised between the second and third episodes, is there anything, Elizabeth, that you would specifically like to see more of, that you'd like to see addressed? Any mystery you'd like to be resolved, or any question you'd like to be answered? What are you looking to get out of the next episode, or are you willing at this point just to be along for the ride?
Because of the book, I think we just talked about how much I like that scene.
Yes,
I really want a beautiful
the rooftop scene. We'll say no more than that. Yes.
I really want that. So if I don't get it, I think I'll be all right, because I'm sure they'll make other choices that will be lovely. They certainly have done thus far. So if I get, another something as striking as the Anansi sequence, then that's going to be fine, and I can really get past it. But that's what I'm looking forward to the most. I sure hope that I get it.
So you're looking for a little more mystery, a little more mysticism, maybe?
Yes. I love the mysticism, and I love getting more. I'm so glad that we got, that Chernobog did tell the story of his brother and of the going gray, because, again, since I'm not doing my Wikipedia research, I need them to tell me these stories. I need to hear the myths, and that's a big part of what I'm here for. So
What's interesting about that is that that's one version of the Chernobog story,
Of
and
course,
the
of
Zarias
course,
are
yeah.
not generally depicted in the way that Gaiman has depicted them in the book, and now they have been depicted in the series. Traditionally, in most versions of the story, there are only 2 Zariah sisters.
Yep.
Fascinating.
Gaiman added the third to kind of echo the idea of the Norns or the Fates from Greek mythology, and
Right.
did so, I think, to fantastic purpose. They work
Well,
narratively
also another 3.
So much
We have
more beautiful.
a lot of
It's another
threes.
3 through the story. Yeah. Yeah. So, Daphne, what are you looking forward to next week? What do you want from episode 3?
God, I'm so easy because, I just want, a whole lot of Wednesday and a whole lot
Sure.
of Wednesday in Shadow. So and then I just feel
You'll
like
get that.
right, exactly. So I know I'm getting what I want. And then I just feel like so far in these 2 episodes, they throw me other characters that I find delightful. So I'm pretty much happy. Like I just,
Keep doing what you're doing, American
well,
God.
I think, yeah, I mean, I do have to say that I feel like, aspects of the aesthetic, are not my favorite. But whatever. I mean, again,
Yeah.
I'm getting a whole lot of stuff I do love,
Sure.
and I get to talk to you all about it. So really just, this is a total win for me. And just there are Ian McShane gifs all over the internet, and that's just like the best thing for me.
Sure, of course.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining me this week. As I said, we'll be back next week with episode 3, Head Full of Snow. It has been a pleasure as always. Elizabeth, where can people find you on the internet, should they be so inclined?
Oh, look for me on Twitter. I'm usually there. Elizabeth Ray 555. You can also find me or at some of the other shows that I do at commonroomradio.com.
Which is your favorite show that you do, would you say? Besides this
this
one,
one, of
obviously.
course, dear.
Besides this one.
Wow. This put you in a really uncomfortable position here
Right? What are you saying?
with your 2 co-hosts.
I'm saying, is there a show that you might do about pirates, which you would recommend to people who now all have Starz subscriptions?
It's okay. That's my job.
I was going to say you're going to ask her,
Daphne.
and then
Tell us about Fathoms Deep.
Oh, well, Liz and I, and Alastair has been our guest twice, and we will not stop there. We do a podcast called Fathoms Deep about black sails, which you all can watch because you already have Starz now.
do it.
Go watch it. It's extraordinary. It's a fantastic show, and Fathoms Deep is a peerless podcast. It does some of the finest critical and literary analysis I have ever heard in my life. You guys are fantastic, and I'm so thrilled to have you here for Storms on the Way. Where else can people find you online, Daphne? You haunt Twitter too, I've heard, from time to time.
I do. Yes, I've learned from a few people now that gifts are my superpower, and
They certainly are.
I am at Daphne Olive and also at Black Sails Cast, which is the Twitter account of Fathoms Deep, where you will see many, many gifs of pirates.
That will do it for us this week. I'll be back tomorrow with the next book session in which I'm going to attempt chapters 7 and 8. Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride. And then we'll be back next week with the next episode of The American Gods TV adaptation. Until then, take care.